The smell of human urine and feces is thick in the air. Even after spending more than 60 days in a toilet, there's no getting used to it. For the past 2 months, you've spent every day the same, wading through sewage and digging through dirt, all to make this 150-foot-long tunnel to freedom. Tonight, you will finally find out if all this effort was even worth it. Crawling on your hands and knees, you reach the end of the tunnel. And as you pull out the tools to carve out the last few inches of dirt left to keep the exit of the tunnel concealed, you think to yourself, what awaits you on the other side? Freedom, or a fate worse than the one you were trying to escape? Swerving from the crossfire of German airships, Royal Air Force fighter Bill Ash dove through the air in his Spitfire plane, narrowly avoiding getting shot. Bill had joined the war in disgust at the atrocities the German Reich was committing. Since his home country, America, had yet to join the war, he moved to Canada to join the Royal Air Force under Britain. As a result, his American citizenship and passport were revoked, but it was all for a good cause. Bill had to make a fast decision. The engine was flaring up and full of bullet holes. He couldn't hold on for much longer. Eyeing a flat field near a small French village, he took a sharp dive, landing upside down. Bill came out of the wreck with few injuries. The same couldn't be said for the poor Spitfire. But now that he was behind enemy lines, he had to act quickly to avoid capture. Bill made a run for the nearby village, eventually coming across the home of a woman who dressed him in civilian clothes. She was one of many kind people who helped Bill with shelter, forged papers, and his eventual transit to Paris. But once the pilot finally made it to Paris, he decided that the best way to evade capture was to hide in plain sight. Bill would go to the swimming pool, the zoo, the cinema, and even had a tooth fixed at a Jewish dentist. All was going well until he was woken up by a knock on the apartment door. The Gestapo demanded that he go with them and arrested 3 people who were harboring him at the time. Bill spent days being interrogated and beaten. He was thrown in a dingy cell, but still refused to give any information about who he was and the people who had helped him. He was scheduled to be executed by firing squad when he was saved by an officer who decided to make him a prisoner of war instead. This was to prevent retaliation against German prisoners of war being held in Britain. Bill was swiftly on his way to a transit camp called Stalag Luft for more interrogations before being sent to Stalag Luft 3. One of the most notorious prisoner camps at the time, and this is where he would become the greatest prison escape artist of all time. Stalag Luft 3 was a prisoner of war camp where Bill developed his love for escaping. The problem was that his time imprisoned led to a drastic weight loss, which meant that he was losing muscle mass too. Bill was used to living with the bare necessities, having a past of homelessness and train hopping, but if he was going to pull off an escape, he needed to bulk up. Bill and his newfound friends got to work, eating food that the prisoners refused to eat, such as clipfish, and playing team sports to get stronger. Next, they needed a plan of escape. During one of their weekly trips to the showers as they were all herded and stripped down, one of the men noticed a small drain beside a trapdoor, leading to the water mains. The opening of this drain pipe was snug, but there was just enough room for 2 men to fit inside. The men got to work, gathering hand-drawn maps former escapees left behind, stealing compasses, and creating what was referred to as the mixture to use as nourishment on the road, which was essentially a concoction of oats, chocolate, and dried fruit sent from home. The night came before they knew it. Bill and his friend Paddy Barthrop, a downed British pilot, hid under the showers while everyone else was removing their uniforms to shower. While their planned diversion caused by other prisoners was making the head count more difficult, the 2 planned to emerge from the trapdoor, sneak their way across the compound, and cut through the wire fence. Unfortunately, they didn't get far, because shortly after the shower was emptied, guards and their dogs burst into the showers in search of the men. The dogs found the trapdoor almost immediately, and the 2 were pulled out and marched to the cooler, their nickname for solitary confinement. Shortly after, the 2 were moved to another camp in Szubin, Poland called Oflag 21B, where their quest for freedom would reach new heights. Oflag 21B wasn't originally built to be a prison camp. Converted from a school, the layout made the camp difficult to guard. Bill's first attempt to escape Oflag used the resulting blind spots to his advantage. When the camp went to bed for the night, 2 groups planning to escape hid. One of the groups were inside the barracks, and the other huddled in a blind spot between the machine gun posts. They moved to action. One group cut the electricity generator, shrouding the camp in darkness, and without a second to spare, they all booked it to the fence, armed with ladders, determined to make it. But just as they lined the fences with ladders, a flash of light beamed on the men. None of them had anticipated a secondary lighting system to automatically kick in. Bolting back towards the compound, they safely made it back to their bunks, leaving behind the ladders to be found by very confused officers. After the failed group effort, Bill decided to give flying solo a shot. One day as he was strolling alongside the fence, he noticed a work detail of non-officers and Russian prisoners getting ready to leave the camp. Not about to miss out on the opportunity, Bill hid his prison uniform under a long coat as a simple disguise and slipped into the group when the guards were looking the other way. The group was herded to a local railway station where they were instructed to unload a train transporting goods. Bill waited for a slight lapse in the guards' attention and rolled onto the far side of the train, breaking into a run for the woods. He didn't make it far before the guards surrounded him. Thrown into the cooler once again, Bill still thought it was worth the effort. But Bill's stay in the cooler was different this time. The guards hadn't done a good job patting him down for contraband, and he managed to hide a file taped to his leg. There was a small window with 3 metal bars leading to the outside. When the coast was clear, the determined prisoner began filing his way through one of the bars. To hide his handiwork, he used bread given by the guards. Unfortunately, by the time he got through one bar, he was transferred to another cell. And before he was able to even begin sawing his way through the next cell, a guard noticed his handiwork in the previous one, and the file was confiscated. Bill got another 2 weeks tacked onto his solitary confinement, and had no choice but to wait it out. However, a new and improved plan was already in fruition once Bill got back to his bunk, and just before Christmas, the craziest escape was hatched from the bottom of a toilet. With the months leading up to their big escape, the group of prisoners, who had a vast array of experience, created civilian clothes, escape rations, and forged documents. Bill and the other inmates had their eyes on the latrines because the building was closest to the fences. There, they would tunnel their way through one of the toilets, dig 150 feet past the wire, and all the way into the nearby woods where they could run off. A row of toilets laid ahead of the prisoners. They decided to sacrifice the last toilet by the wall, using it as the entrance for the tunnel. The first problem they ran into was the toilet hole being too small for a grown man to fit through. In order to accommodate, they chipped away the edges to make the tunnel entrance. It was a disgusting job, having to trek through the waste, but they hoped it would be worth the effort. To light the way while digging, they crafted a makeshift lamp fueled by margarine and a bootlace wick. To prevent cave-ins, Bill tried to convince everyone to give up their bedboards. He managed to get one from each prisoner, but opted to give up all of his, leaving only a wire frame to sleep on. This was obviously less comfortable than the floor, but he couldn't let the guards get suspicious. To protect the tunnel from the prying eyes of prison guards, a prisoner known as the Throne Stooge would sit on the toilet entrance while the others tunneled. Or as I like to call him, the Surf Shark, because just as he protected the tunnel and the men inside from the prying eyes of prison guards, today's sponsor, Surf Shark, ensures the security of their VPN servers, which act as a tunnel to keep you and your internet traffic hidden from the prying eyes of your internet provider and the government bodies they answer to. Except instead of having to wade through a splash pad of human waste, I can access this tunnel with the click of a button. Oh my. And in no time at all, I come out the other side of the barbed wire fence of internet surveillance prison at the website of my choice, looking like I'm from any country I want. Like Netflix, but I'm British brew.
Well, let's bloody well get into it then.
And now that I'm from the UK, I can watch the American version of The Office because for some daft reason, American Netflix only has the British office. But on top of that, when you're visiting sites that don't require you to log into an account tied to your personal identity, Surfshark's encrypted tunnel to freedom allows you to browse the web anonymously. Your internet provider will only see that you're accessing Surfshark servers, and the website you're visiting will only see that you're an unidentifiable Surfshark user. But Surfshark knows who I am. What if they get hacked or certain agencies come knocking, demanding user data? Well, this leads to my favorite part about Surfshark. While many other popular VPNs use hard drive-based servers that can store data, Surfshark uses RAM-only servers that automatically wipe all data every time the server is turned off. So even if they had a security breach, which is, to this day, never happened, there wouldn't be much data to leak. So if you're looking for a VPN, Surfshark is a fantastic option. And if you click the link in the description and use promo code BREWSOLVES, you can get 3 extra months free while at the same time knowing that you're helping our bloody brilliant channel make more smashing content. Lamb sauce. Now let's get back to Bill and the boys digging that latrine tunnel. By March 3rd, 1943, the tunnel was nearly complete, and 2 days later, 33 men crawled through the tunnels. They were so close together, nose to foot, that it felt cramped and stuffy. The fear of oxygen running out didn't stop the men's determination. Bill was in the very front, trying to finish digging the last couple of inches at the exit side of the tunnel underneath the potato field when success! Emerging from the tunnel, the gleeful group of men continued on their hands and knees through the potato fields to avoid searchlights until they reached the woods. Once they crossed the tree line, they broke into a run, then split up to avoid detection. Bill and his friend Eddie drank from streams as they slowly made their way further from the camp. But their freedom didn't last long. 6 days after their escape, the two were woken up from their light sleep by a group of German farm workers and were shortly arrested. Back to square one at Stalag Luft 3, they learned virtually all of their fellow escapees had been recaptured, but Bill's determination was unwavering. He would escape, no matter what the cost. Aware of his previous exploits, the guards were alert whenever Bill strayed too close to one of the gates. But nothing could deter this serial escapee. Bill heard a rumor that the sergeant pilots from the neighboring prison were being sent to a camp in Lithuania. He saw Lithuania as his ticket back to Britain, since it was a lot closer. Meanwhile, Don Fair, a New Zealander from the other camp, wasn't too pleased with the idea of going to Lithuania. So the two had their friends distract the guards while they scaled the fences and exchanged papers to assume each other's identity. By the summer, Bill was transferred to Stalag Luft 6 in Lithuania. He quickly made friends with fellow inmates, and since it worked once before, decided to try digging a tunnel in the latrine. However, problems quickly arose when they discovered that the tunnel was prone to flooding due to the high water table of the Lithuanian marshland. With the latrine tunnel plan flushed down, that's when they noticed the hot water boiler in the adjacent laundry room. It would be easy enough to take apart and reconstruct so they could use the boiler to conceal a tunnel if they dug underneath. And it wasn't directly connected to the sewage lines, so it would be easier than digging near the toilet. By the time their tunnel reached 150 feet in length, the Gestapo was getting suspicious and conducted a raid. Tunneling equipment was found in the bunks, which revealed there was an escape scheme. Luckily, under the boiler, their tunnel remained undiscovered. The guards even brought a steamroller in to roll over areas they suspected a tunnel would be dug, so that it would cave in. Bill and the other prisoners still had their tunnel intact, but knowing the guards were onto them, and with most of their equipment now confiscated, they decided to work on opening the exit of the tunnel sooner for their best shot at escaping. And even though the tunnel wasn't quite finished, they had managed to reach the tree line outside the gates. Not willing to risk another raid, they had to escape as soon as possible. The men chose a windy, rainy night for their escape, banking on the guards being less keen on patrolling. They placed papier-mâché dummies in their bunks and had punched holes in the walls so the remaining prisoners could sneak into the adjacent bunk during count to stall the discovery of their disappearance. 50 men lined up in the tunnel, making their way to freedom. But freedom wasn't so easy. The first thing Bill noticed when he emerged from the tunnel was that the wind had died down and it wasn't nearly as dark as anticipated. Nevertheless, he made it to the trees just in time for the sirens to begin wailing, followed quickly by searchlights combing the trees and the sound of gunshots. The escape was successful for only 7 of the men. The 8th emerged from the tunnel exit right as a sentry walked by, and a warning shot into the tunnel deterred the rest of the men from leaving the tunnel. Meanwhile, Bill was headed east in the direction of the Russian front, eventually finding a farm where he spent the night hiding. He was woken up early in the morning by a Lithuanian villager. Bill quickly figured out that the villager seemed to detest anyone who was part of the war, trying to determine if he was German, Russian, or British. Not wanting to risk whether Americans were on his list of enemies, Bill just told him he was Texan. The villager didn't really know what that meant, so he allowed Bill to work on his farm. But Bill's farming life was short-lived. He didn't want to spend the rest of the war planting turnips and shoveling dirt. His plan was to make it to Britain, but first, he needed to figure out a way to get there. Communicating with another farmer using hand gestures, he was told there was a boathouse nearby. Following the directions, Bill made his way to the coast. He figured he could steal a boat and go to neutral Sweden, finding his way back from there. All was well with his plan, until he tried to move the boat into the water. He was too weak. Taking his chance on the kindness of strangers, Bill approached some farmers around the docks, only to find out they were off-duty German soldiers. He was swiftly handcuffed and thrown into the back of a black car, heading for the local Gestapo. Eye to eye with a Gestapo interrogator, Bill claimed to be Don Fair, but his cover was quickly blown when his fingerprints identified him as Bill Ash, a prisoner of war who had made 10 escape attempts, all unsuccessful. How could someone be so good at escaping be so bad at staying free? The Gestapo were convinced the only reasonable explanation must be that Bill was sent to the Allies to train prisoners of war on how to escape. They decided that he needed to be executed. The problem was that prisoners of war were protected by the Geneva Convention. They couldn't execute Bill without retaliation. To mediate this, they planned to put him on trial to prove without any reasonable doubt that he was a professional escape artist. Luckily for Bill, the war was ramping up and the trial had to be delayed. Bill was sent back to Stalag Luft 3 for the time being. One would think this close call with the Gestapo would deter the young man, but Bill was still convinced freedom was just one more escape away. Not long after arriving back at the camp, Bill hopped in the back of a truck that was leaving, but only managed to get to the second gate before he was caught. He was swiftly thrown into the cooler. Soon, after his final stay in solitary confinement, Bill conspired with the neighboring compound to swap with another American prisoner for a day to exchange information. But soon after, D-Day landings began over Normandy, signaling the beginning of the end of the war. In January 1945, German soldiers stationed at Stalag Luft 3 force-marched the prisoners westward across modern-day Poland further away from the Allied lines, in the midst of the freezing cold winter. Using barns, cowsheds, and pigsties to shelter from the crisp winter, the prisoners made the treacherous march, many not making it. But Bill Ash, ever the escape artist, managed to get away and flee across a battlefield as the war still raged behind him. He later reminisced, "Ahead of me, I could see a tank and some raised guns. I slowed down, but I kept moving forward. Rifles clicked at the ready. 'Don't shoot,' someone shouted. 'He's British.' I replied, 'Actually, I'm American, and Canadian, and British. It's a long story.' Bill was alive to tell his heroic tale, making a name for himself in Britain, eventually working for the BBC. He lived a long life, passing peacefully at 96 in 2014. Bill Ash's legacy of finally succeeding to escape after his 13th attempt will forever live on as one of the greatest war stories. Well done, Bill Ash. I don't think I could do a prison escape. Then again, they'd have to catch me first. After all, I'm a wanted man for crimes against humor. And I've been on the pun for years.